Great, thank you. Hello everybody. Thank you for joining this webinar. My name is Rachel Holtby. I'm a PhD student with Northumbria University, and I'm also currently working on the Marine Pioneer, bringing lessons from the programme together. Today, I'm delivering a presentation about governance of the marine and coastal environment. I will be presenting some of my own research that I carried out in my PhD, but also I'll be highlighting work from others that has contributed towards the Marine Pioneer governance outputs. The Pioneers were set up by DEFRA with 4 main asks, and governance was not specifically one of them. However, all of the strands of work, both in North Devon and Suffolk Marine Pioneer regions, it became so apparent that governance underpins everything, and understanding governance arrangements and power structures are crucial for any programme, for any decision making. It turned out through the Marine Pioneer journey that different projects actually looked at governance either as their focal point, like myself, or as part of their other project work. So although in this webinar series there are presentations on the projects as a whole, in this particular webinar I will be highlighting the governance areas from these different projects, specifically relating to marine protected areas by WWF and fisheries governance from NEF, the New Economics Foundation. Then I will talk about the PhD research that has been carried out in conjunction with the Marine Pioneers from Beth Wills, Natasha Bradshaw and myself. Also, I will speak briefly about the North Devon Natural Capital Plan because that has a strong governance section. Then I will tell you about some consultancy work on participatory mapping and how really engaging with local people in decision making can be achieved. And lastly, I will share our recommendations from the combination of this work so far. Okay, so let's start. Firstly, let me set the context. A lot of research over recent years has shown us that the environment is not in a functioning and productive state. The Asset and Risk Register produced by Sian Rees and her team at Plymouth University in conjunction with the Pioneer shows, amongst other things, that many service benefits are at high risk due to the degraded quality of habitats, and that priorities need to enable rapid recovery and should aim for habitat and species restoration as an ambition above maintaining the status quo. In many places, we have gone beyond the need to conserve and business as usual. We now need to actively restore our environment. You could take any quotes from many quotes from the 25-year environment plan that talk about restoring different areas of the environment, but this one here sums it up. In order to help leave the environment in a better condition for the next generation, we need to restore and create areas of wetland, woodland, grassland, and coastal habitat to provide the greatest opportunity for wildlife to flourish and to promote the wider economic and social benefits that healthy habitats offer. And to achieve this, there's a commitment through the government's 25-year environment plan to develop strong governance, a robust delivery framework, and everyone to play their part, with strong local leadership and more integrated delivery, and a more integrated delivery framework. Currently, marine and coastal governance is dispersed and lacks key areas which would allow for this effective integrated planning and delivery. Governance and management of marine activities such as fishing and marine protection by area are still quite separate in their governance. So too are land-based activities that affect the marine and coastal environment. Indeed, environment, social, health and well-being, development, industry and business sectors all operate within their own sectors, and departments within those sectors, to the most part, operate within their own silos. Required specializations in daily working practices has caused vertical and horizontal separation, where siloed working has evolved within and amongst government agencies and organizations. Current governance structures create a disconnect between national policy aspiration and on-the-ground delivery, where place-based thinking is not fully considered. This means that what is requested on a national level is sometimes not possible or not suitable to deliver at the local level. We will not achieve the government's ambitions to restore the environment unless we embrace the complexity and better integrate planning and delivery with strong governance and a systems approach to working together. Through work carried out within the Pioneer, we have found that to use a natural capital approach, to blend public and private funds, to best enable partnership and collaborative working, for community resilience and for better managed fisheries and marine protected areas, and importantly, to be able to restore the environment, strong governance arrangements have to be more transparent, inclusive, and adaptive. And when I say adaptive here, I mean that there needs to be flexibility in currently quite prescriptive legislation. There needs to be feedback loops that allow for learning of best practice and rapid evolution of ways of working better for better outcomes. And there needs to be trials before we say 100% written in stone, this is the way to do something. And that will be different in different geographical areas. There should be further integration of planning and delivery across the marine and coastal and adjoining terrestrial areas, where place-based decision-making can happen by local groups that are connected to national systems. In this local area, a whole site systems approach that considers the whole social, ecological, and economical system across the land and sea in a given place, and all of the interactions and cumulative effects and dependencies of all of those factors should be considered in decision-making. So to clarify, governance is the interactions amongst structures, processes, and traditions that determine how power and responsibilities are exercised, how decisions are taken, and how citizens and other stakeholders can have their say. These aspects are essential to achieve the big and rapid changes we need in order to reach our urgent goals for climate and biodiversity. Strong governance should connect people across the different sectors, across the complexity, and provide the structures through which decisions can be made and accounted for to integrate planning and delivery across departments from national to local scales. Okay, so now I will move on to tell you about the outputs from the different projects in relation to their governance strands. The first project I want to tell you about is from the WWF UK Seas project. Amongst other work, this project developed a scoping document which identified stakeholder perceptions of marine governance, named "Who's in Charge Around Here?" Participants that were local stakeholders to the Marine Pioneer North Devon area were asked to identify all of the organisations and groups that they think are involved in decision-making and show how powerful they believe them to be by placing them on a circle of influence where most influential people were at the centre. They decided that there was 143 organisations and groups identified as playing a role in marine governance in North Devon. This diversity brings both opportunities in the form of lots of interested and motivated people, but also challenges for coordination and communication amongst those groups. They identified that 40 organisations are perceived as being particularly powerful or influential. Again, this is a lot of organisations thought to be involved in decision-making. However, the majority of organisations perceived as powerful in North Devon were actually national organisations rather than locally North Devon based. Participants were asked on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is the most, do you feel like you have meaningful input in marine management decisions? The most popular score was 4 out of 10. And this means that people feel they have input, but actually limited influence over the resulting decisions. This work was furthered using a specifically designed participatory mapping exercise and an online survey to collect further evidence on stakeholder perceptions of MPA governance. Finding that there has necessarily been a focus on designation of MPAs in order to create an ecologically coherent network. However, aspects of effective, equitable and integrated governance and management of these MPAs has not yet been fully considered, and there is no legal requirement to establish local coordination groups. They found that MPAs have a focus on conservation objectives to maintain or conserve specific habitats or features, but the MPA objectives do not always reflect the breadth of societal interests or adhere to principles of ecosystem-based management. And information about MPAs is centrally held, technical, and therefore difficult for local stakeholders to engage with. This means that decision-making offers irregular and formal opportunities for participation. From this work, WWF recommend management plans or management statements that should be developed for every MPA designation. And these should be co-designed with clear ownership for delivery of results. There should be investment in social capital with support in the form of capacity building, training, investment in networks, ways of sharing information and resource to build and sustain the networks of people and organization that can galvanize around MPAs at a local scale. There should be a legal requirement to establish local or regional coordination groups in the Marine and Coastal Access Act or similar. This would enable resources and assistance to be funneled down from the national level to the local level. They would also allow local and current information to be fed up to national coordination groups. They found there should be improved co-working and communication between and within management agency teams, and more strategically planned monitoring and evaluation. Adaptive governance relies on regular inputs of status and trend information to monitor management impact and be responsive to site needs. Evidence needs to be strategically determined and opened up to different sources, for example, from fisher people and citizen science, to remove the bottleneck associated with expensive, lengthy, and centrally commissioned surveys. I'll leave it there for that project, but there are dense reports and also a webinar on that. The reports you can find on the WWF UKC's webpage. Okay, and then in regards to fisheries governance, NEF, the New Economics Foundation, carried out research in North Devon to establish how fishing opportunities are currently allocated and outline different community and co-management models. Again, there is a full webinar on this, but just to echo in regards to their fisheries governance outputs, they recommend locally understood, managed and governed fisheries research and management plans, which are actually being started in North Devon now. They recommend quota reallocation based on socio-economic factors and low impact fishing. And where possible, there should be community-led local fisheries management where fisher people are in partnership with fisheries managers. This would require changes to the current marine management structure and additional knowledge of the ecology of fish stocks in a local region. But to increase opportunities, fishers could either set up their own or join producer organisations. It's noted in the reports that the process of MMO recognition may take some time, but this would enable the fishers to lease quota. So please check out the fisheries webinar for more detail on that. In regards to academic work carried out in conjunction with the Pioneer, Beth Wills from the University of Surrey has been carrying out her PhD research exploring the intersection between local governance and the use of the natural capital approach through the perspectives of local, regional and national actors. Through a variety of methods, ideas of governance were explored through participation of local people, through co-management, and through multi-level governance. Beth found, alongside many other outputs, that decision-making at local and national levels is disconnected, and that organizations and actors who can bridge this gap is vital. For partnerships to transverse scales requires appreciation of different worldviews, and facilitation is needed by respected leaders. Also, I wanted to draw attention to Natasha Bradshaw's PhD research at the University of West England, which has focused on collaborative governance for coastal stewardship. Natasha's research engaged with over 150 UK-wide experts, exploring areas of consensus towards future approaches to governance across the land-sea interface. Natasha's findings contain recommendations on the approach to governance, collaboration and partnerships, and the institutional frameworks and land-sea interactions and socio-legal mechanisms for stewardship. A selection of her findings include the need to bring top-down and bottom-up approaches together through shared vision, underpinned by a governance structure which attracts sustainable finance. She found that regular local monitoring and engagement sustained through a national policy requirement that linked to the 25-year environment plan was needed. Also, to improve coastal planning, this could be strengthened through existing marine and terrestrial planning systems, rather than developing a whole new approach for coastal planning. And that statutory coastal plans could be nested within these marine and terrestrial plans, and they could build upon existing voluntary plans. Okay, and here is a selection of my work, Governance for Integrated Planning and Management to Restore Natural Capital. My PhD research commenced halfway through the Pioneers to facilitate knowledge exchange, both at the North Devon and Suffolk Marine Pioneer locations, through conducting semi-structured interviews with stakeholders to understand if there is fit-for-purpose governance in place in the marine and coastal environment to use a natural capital approach, if a natural capital approach can help with decision-making in the marine and coastal environment, what governance structure would be needed to enable the use of a natural capital approach in a fair and inclusive way, and whether a natural capital approach could also help non-environmental sectors to further include environmental data and considerations into their daily activities. My report found that there was a general consensus that a natural capital approach can help with decision-making in the marine and coastal environment to highlight the value of nature and integrate nature further into decision-making. Numerous participants also stated that a natural capital approach can assist with partnership working, strategic planning, shared language and shared resources, and to illuminate beneficiaries and discuss trade-offs. However, many participants warned of the use of a natural capital approach with a purely economic approach, and instead promoted it as part of a suite of decision-making tools. Governance, therefore, is intrinsic to the success or otherwise of the natural capital approach, as power within governance structures can affect decision-making outcomes. That's true regardless of the tool being used. The natural capital approach is about better decision-making, but arguments were made that people and institutions, if they're unchanged, we're still likely to proliferate failings, even with a theoretically solid natural capital framework in place. Major themes discussed regarding the governance structure is that presently, the environment is out of balance and not weighted equally with economic sectors in decision-making. That decision-making organizations across the land-coast-sea interface are disjointed and misaligned, which often results in confusion and project inertia, and there can be minimal appreciation of cumulative effects in decision-making processes. Also, currently, there's not a culture or standard procedure to apply for interdisciplinary funding. It was suggested by a selection of participants that these issues are because governance structures have evolved over time and therefore are not ideal for present or future conditions. So from this research, recommendations centered around greater connection and connecting roles to enable a systems approach to decision-making. The report offers additionality in the concept of environmental systems health specialists. These roles in the governance for marine and coastal governance and adjoining terrestrial systems would build on the stakeholders described connector roles, where connecting both vertically from inside government to delivery levels and horizontally between agencies and organizations within a geographical nested local area are the main objectives for this role. Additionally, this role would manage the system to build and nurture relationships, cross-pollinate ideas and resources, and ultimately ensure optimum health of the governance system, the social relationships, to best deliver potential restoration in the environmental system. So, this looks complicated, right? But it's not really. Here, I am pictorially representing the combination of ideas from the interview data that I gathered and also from academic literature to provide a theoretical governance structure to manage the marine and coastal system. I'll talk you through it. At the top right and center, the big dark blue ovals, you have higher level politics that set international and national priorities and targets. These areas are big and slower moving, but in general set the direction of travel and provide the legal obligations. Then, underneath that, you have more regionally specific objectives, such as the 11 marine plans, which signpost to relevant regulations, duties, and strategies. Around the country, within each of the marine plan areas, there could be dedicated representatives to that plan area from the MMO and the IFCAs as lead organisations who sit in a group with marine and coastal reps from Natural England, Environment Agency, JNCC and CFAS where needed, to work on a shared vision across the agencies and shared goals for that particular area, who all freely share data amongst one another and have the capabilities to apply for integrated and interdisciplinary funding from the Treasury, to collaborate on programs together, and such as the environment and ecosystems themselves work as a system, the agencies work together as a system in a given place. Within this, the next tier could be nested pockets, nested groups of people that are closer to the natural environment on a day-to-day basis. Each government agency representative, as just discussed, could also sit on a board with their relative local nested area representatives from local authorities, local nature partnerships, AOMBs, local enterprise partnerships, coastal partnerships, fisheries producer organisations, and health, and maybe even school boards. Depending on the local setup, this would have a slightly different dynamic. And these groups would work together towards local priorities and can actively make decisions in a more timely manner. Those group representatives would then have wider links and communications with their community groups and tradespeople on the next tier down there. This is termed polycentric governance, where you have many centres of decision-making. Here, what is at the bottom of this picture, but not necessarily considered the bottom, but at the nested plans, the nested groups that are closer to the environment on a daily basis. Here it is much easier to understand the stocks of natural capital and ecosystem service flows. Here it is much easier to understand trade-offs and can be much faster moving and more proactive or reactive to change, which is really important when we consider our future climate change possibilities. As the groups of decision makers get more targeted to a certain nested locality, it is easier to be adaptive, to perform adaptive governance and adaptive management based on real-time feedback, so reaction times can be much quicker. This creates the basis for a framework and provides the legislation and direction to guide decisions and actions from the top, but there should be greater emphasis on local knowledge and delivery based on local priorities, with an increase of resources deployed to those local levels to increase the connection between decision makers and place, and the ability to work towards this legislation and national objectives in different ways in different places. Importantly, these links are both ways, down from government, but also there is a definite and recognised link and channels for communication upwards to DEFRA and the government to feed information back into the system, so the whole national system can continuously learn and adapt. And where needed, there is these links to ascertain sign-off of anything that can't be decided upon at the local levels. It's completely acknowledged that agencies have a connection to local people and local stakeholders. However, there is a part that needs some extra focus across the agencies, and that is mainly across the horizontal connecting roles, basically that links everything together. Time in working days should be given to building relationships to enable more joined up thinking and approaches to problem solving. And in the middle of the page there, it's here that you can see at a reasonably high level that the environmental system health specialists sit. Their role, as I said, is to manage the relationships within the governance system for a better outcome for the environmental system at large. These system health specialists would speak to both DEFRA and other areas of the government and across the agencies, and also, where possible, sit within the nested plans. I think realistically there would need to be about 6 of these roles around England, and they would build the connections and the relationships to bring the system together. If we're going to restore the environment, then we need to work together more, rather than competing for pots of funding or working on separate projects that sometimes unknowingly have negative impacts on another project. We need to best combine international and national targets with policy and science and local and traditional knowledge to solve local challenges in a given place. If we do this, we would hope to see a shift from knowledge products that try to be a panacea for the whole country that don't always work or fit everywhere, to a more each challenge focused co-production of knowledge to produce more suitable outcomes for a given place. Okay, so an example of a nested plan is the North Devon Marine Natural Capital Plan, which has evolved out of the Marine Pioneer in conjunction with the North Devon UNESCO Biosphere. It's still very new. It's still in the process of being written, and it's in its final stages, but it's intended to be a high resolution spatial plan that addresses local decision-making to support delivery of the 25-year environment plan across all of its chapters. It's to pilot a natural capital approach to management of the marine environment in a local place. The Marine Natural Capital Plan pioneers an approach to integrated governance of the marine environment in the context of local strategic plans and economic development strategies. It will also link heavily to the landscape pioneer in the adjoining landscape space, which has produced a strategic natural capital plan so that both the marine, coast and land areas are linked. Again, there is a full webinar on this, so I'll not say much more, but importantly, this is one example of how to link national direction with local priorities and governance across from the source to the sea. Okay, and The last bit of work that I would like to share here is by Daryl Burden and Tavis Potts, who have completed some excellent participatory mapping of natural capital. It's a demonstration of local participation in decision-making. Participatory mapping is a direct means of co-producing knowledge with stakeholders and communities, which allows spatial mapping of ecosystem features, benefits, and values on a local scale, where everyone concerned is able to gather around a GIS map and talk about the natural capital features and the ecosystem service benefits they know of. In the context of ecosystem services valuation and mapping, stakeholders provide local, spatially explicit information about the use and value of the natural capital therein, in both monetary and non-monetary terms. This negates the need to use proxy data derived from literature or modelling and can provide rich information to discuss values and trade-offs. Also, their research provides more evidence to support and provide understanding as to how environmental benefits support well-being, because you can ask the local people what each area on the map means to them and their community. Again, just a snapshot, but you can find this report on the Suffolk AONB website called Participatory Mapping. Okay, so this has been a snippet and some key messages from individual projects that have occurred in conjunction with the Marine Pioneer. I would be very happy to hear from you to discuss further or to point you in the right direction for more information. Though different people and different types of organisations have worked on governance in the marine and coastal area in their own time, there is a similarity in all of the messages. We need to actively restore our environment. Currently, the marine and coastal governance is disjointed and lacks key areas which would allow for more effective integrated planning and delivery from national to local and across sectors. We need more effective integrated planning and delivery. We need to work together more across government and agencies to solve big, complex challenges. We need time in working days given to the importance of connecting across the marine, coast and land remits, especially in a given geographic place. And there needs to be more resources and emphasis on place-based local delivery levels that link to those national systems. These changes are happening, but not yet comprehensively or consistently enough. To deliver change at the scale that is needed, we need to transform the way we manage our environment. We need to become more transparent and inclusive. From my interviews, it was clear that people long to know what is happening. Even if it's not exactly what they would like to happen, they would still like to be included in the conversation, and especially when it affects their livelihoods or their health. Local people have a lot to offer in terms of knowledge, and some groups also have quite a lot of time to give if they are listened to. Co-production might take a little longer, but it comes with much better outcomes that is most suitable for a given area. Not everyone's going to be 100% satisfied, but building on shared goals and values in collaborative work can bring people together. And adaptive, where the legal framework allows for trials, pilots and action research before fortifying regulations and creates space for feedback and adaptation. Another recommendation is that it will be crucially important going forward, especially with constrained budgets, that we identify and ensure linkages and integration, such as the Marine Natural Capital Plan and the Strategic Natural Capital Plan from the Landscape Pioneer, and really fortifying those connections, getting better at applying for interdisciplinary funding and working towards shared goals will be more beneficial than individual targets and competing for limited money. Also, the whole marine and coastal area needs to be assigned in collaboration with and for the ownership of local people. These local geographic areas that link up to terrestrial systems, that mirror environmental system and feed spatially explicit data collected by local practices, both traditional and commissioned, into larger regional marine plans. And local planning and delivery is based on local priorities, where resources such as facilitation, education on using a natural capital approach at a local business level, participatory mapping as previously described, training on circular economy ideas, sustainability and restoration education, and also importantly, open access to data and places to meet and engage should be provided to educate and empower local people to enable them to contribute, to work together and take ownership of their local area. This effort should be put in now at the beginning and will allow people to make decisions going forward into the future. And lastly, this all needs to be supported by connectors and connecting roles where government and government agencies and respective local area organisations are connected and coordinated through something like environmental system health specialists. That's just a title I've come up with, but the sentiment across the research is similar. There needs to be more connection to build and manage the relationships needed to restore the integrity and the health of the system. So thank you. All of this research will be in the Marine Pioneer final document and will also have links to the respective much larger and much detailed reports. Thanks for listening.